Hi, this is Alex Orris, Classroom Technology Integration Specialist for Bullock and Roberts Middle Schools in Cuyahoga Falls. This is part three of creating a Google Sheet that includes student ownership. And so far, what we've done is create a table and some conditional formats and some averaging and at least one graph. This video, I want to spend some time looking at a second type of graph that shows change over time, really looking at student progress. And to create a graph, what we've done before is select the cells that we would like to graph. So in this case, we're going to do A1 all the way to K8, including our future weeks. I'm going to go back to insert a chart. And like before, it gave me some recommendations. Not all of these are valid. This is the one that we currently have placed. It's a bar graph type of comparison where you could look at one subject at a time over your weeks. What I'd like to do is go to chart types and make a line graph. So line graphs are designed to show change over time, progress. But the key here is over time. And right now we have our line graph automatically placed with our subjects on the bottom and time is on the axis. What we need to do is switch the rows and columns so that we have change over time. And what it's showing me here is basically a pretty scattered graph of my grades because I put no grades in week 2. I see a pretty good graph here. My phys ed score has kind of tended to drop. This is my science score that's kind of going up and then really fell. And I see some progress here in social studies as my graph is going up. But I really like to include my week 1 data as part of this line. And to do that, we click the other checkbox up here, aggregate row 1. And what that does is it makes this, and it does skip week 2 because I didn't put any data in there, but that's okay. It goes from week 1 to week 3, and we could really, at least color by color, look at some progress of our graphs, including this one. That pink line, this is our average score. We can see week by week, I've gone down and back up and back down. It can kind of monitor that over the weeks. We do have some customizing to do. The chart title has been predicted. So we want to customize that by making that title, our chart title, something a lot more valid. So for example, I'll use Mr. Orris's first quarter. And then as I scroll down, one of the things that you can change is the label or the title of your horizontal axis. And right now you notice it still says subject. Well, it says subject because we had switched the rows and columns. So what we need to do is make sure that we give it an appropriate title. Over here, we're going to call this either first quarter or weeks. And that way the subject title or the title at the bottom reflects what is above it. And again, I want to label on my horizontal axis. So in this drop-down menu, the axis will change to left, vertical, my vertical axis. We'll change this title, and again, those are my scores as a percent. So I'll use percentage. And we looked at this in the other type of graph, but right now, this looks really low in Quire, and this looks really low in math, and it is pretty low, but it's not necessarily the bottom. That's showing a 60%, and it can be misleading. Some students like that this zooms in to their data that is more in their zone, but if you wanted to see the whole picture, you could put the minimum as 0, and now you can tell that, my Quire and my math scores, they were low, but they weren't like bottom of the line low. This is more representative of where my grades fall on a 0 to 100 scale. I'll put my max in as 100. And then when we're finished with our graph, we can insert it back into our table. Okay, so I had a graph there before. It's actually right here. This is like before. It's a picture that you can move around, that you can place. I kind of like to be able to see, my couple different data points and data styles right below my table. And this should be set like before. It should be set that, let's say we skip week 6 and when we go to week 7 and we start entering new grades, now let's see if our ELA grade raised up to an 85. It was graphed automatically. Here is my week 5, I should say from week 5, an 85% in week 7. Over here, it's added week 7 in purple, and it's added my ELA grade. It's also graphed my mean score If I add in an 80 for choir, drop down in social studies to a 72, it's going to plot those data points as you go. Science. Notice my science was above my goal when it hit 79, changed colors to go below my goal, and now if I go back to an 80, it's back above my goal again. We really look at this as a way for students to take ownership by looking up their grades and progress book, but also by then using their tech skills and learning some nifty tools on how to make a table and make that table work for you, and then how to graph it so you could really get into the trends about, well, what happened here in week 5 in math? What happened to have my grade drop from about a 90 to about a 60 and then back up? Is this an absent week? Do I need to make sure I'm at school, or was it a test I didn't study for, or a late project? We really look at trends over time. Our phys ed score continues to drop here. We could talk about why it continues to drop. It's just very valid data for any student, and it gets them thinking mathematically. Okay, this is the end of our series for creating a Google Sheet for student ownership. I hope you found it valuable. Thanks for your time.